Welcome to Le Rendezvous. My name is Garance Doré and I'm a writer with so many stories to tell and ideas to share that I created this special moment to talk about all the things that are going on in our lives. So come, let's spend a moment together. Le Rendezvous is brought to you by Doré, the skincare line I co-created, wanting to bring more simplicity and efficacy to our lives. Check out the end of the episode for a special code just for you, the Rendezvous listeners. Have you ever experienced confusion in a relationship? Feeling like you're crazy in love one second, that you don't care the next, that the object of your attention is not sure or doesn't care, that there are a ton of mixed signals, missed opportunities, that person is not really sure about you and you can feel it, but you can't put your finger on it, that you yourself go through these highs and lows and you just don't know what it is and you don't know what to do. Today I want to talk to you about a theory that I have about confusion in love and how to listen to it at the beginning of a love story, and also how to listen to it at the end of a relationship. I'll start by saying, I think one day I finally understood that confusion is a sign in and of itself, not necessarily something we need to dive in and analyze and research and try to understand why am I confused. Sometimes just taking a step back and telling ourselves, I am confused, and that is a sign in itself that I don't need to go and analyze. I know that this relationship is making me feel confusion, and that should tell me enough. I've only had one confusing beginning that ended in a relationship. All the other confusing dates I had, guys that I thought could be my boyfriend, or people that I was into, never went anywhere. As a general rule in my life, anytime there was confusion, relationships wouldn't go anywhere. But then one day, I met this guy and we went on a first date and he literally seduced me with everything, every signal you can imagine. There was the sunset, magnificent view, beautiful champagne, everything. And I fell into all these traps. And from this gigantic high that he gave me, he then became the most confusing date I'd ever had. It's like all these games that I always refused to play, he forced me into them. Not texting for a few days, saying one thing and doing the opposite, sending me mixed messages, planning on a wonderful date and then canceling, or coming to my apartment unannounced and spending the most wonderful time together. There was so much of this, and there were so many signals that were so confusing. He had never had a good relationship, but he also talked so kindly of the people he had been with before. He said that he wasn't looking for anything in terms of a relationship, but he was also talking about having a family and children. Everything felt so confusing to me, and I'm so simple in a way. And as I used to do in these kind of situations, I was trying to navigate it, and I was trying to win at that game. It's almost like with all the confusion he was throwing on me, he had lured me into wanting to clarify all of that. I was attracted to him, but also I wanted to solve the problem that he had put between us. So many things were going on in the background. Usually, if a guy was confusing, it was through his absence, things like breadcrumbing that I had slowly learned to understand. But this was masterful in the way that it was throwing me off constantly. And instead of focusing on if I liked the guy, if I liked spending time with him, if we had the same values, if there was something there. No. Instead, I wanted to figure this problem out, and that also challenged me to seduce him out of it, meaning that I started pretending I was someone else. The number one thing, of course, I should have said is, I don't like these games. Can we stop? And just walk away if he said no. But no, instead, I started pretending I was cool with all of this, that I didn't mind if he didn't text me for a week and then 50 times during one day. It was so challenging to my brain. It was starting to capture all of my attention. There was also all the games on social media where he would like a photo and put a comment or send me a meme on my DM when he hadn't reached out in the last 10 days. It was just such an artful game in confusion. You'd almost think he had read a book like The Art of War. First, confuse them, then you can do anything you want with them. So of course, I was doubling, tripling on efforts to be cool with his behavior, to prove him that I was lovable. And these patterns are things that I had already recognized in me. This insecurity that would push me to try to become someone different, to oversell myself, if you will. But with him, it was interesting because now that I look back at it, it really almost was like it was a game. Usually, men who did that ended up showing in one way or another that they truly didn't care pursuing a relationship with you. But this one just didn't. And we kept playing like that. And I blamed it on myself and I blamed it on everything but him, obviously. And when eventually I had made myself into this perfect ideal of a woman that was virtually impossible to reject, or so I thought, this bizarre courtship ended up in a relationship. And I was so happy. It's almost like I had won an Oscar or something. I was so proud of myself. I had turned that into something real. It was happening. The confusion was going to go away. And finally, I would have won and solved the problem. And I was the best. And this was going to be the best relationship. I remember though, when I felt like our relationship was starting to become serious, doing something that I had never done before. And that is asking around what my friends thought of him. I think it's an interesting sign that the confusion was still here. That in some ways, this was still a game that we were playing. That I needed external validation. And that I was going to a relationship not being really sure about what I was thinking. I think I was still at war inside. It had created this intense confusion. And in some ways, playing the game had completely cut me from feeling my deepest emotions, my fear, and my intuition. And people around me couldn't really understand all that. They hadn't gone through what I had just gone through, almost this conditioning. And I'm pretty sure he didn't really understand the effect he had had on me. I think he was just trying to play a hand, and that he himself couldn't even really believe that it was going to work. I've seen that happen so many times. So many of my friends go through this type of insane, crazy, confusing courtships that leave you on the floor, insecure, trying to understand what is going on. What is this guy doing? Is he seeing that other woman I can see he's interacting with on Instagram? But then he took me on this beautiful date and then he didn't call me for a month. And then he texted me saying he loves me. I've seen that so many times, but I've rarely seen these relationships end up in a relationship like mine did. And to be honest, I think that is the better outcome. And that's what I tell my friends when they're going through these type of things now. I tell them, play if that's what you feel like you need to do, because sometimes it's just very difficult to just walk away. And I never want to shame them about how attached they are to the game and to whatever that relationship is. I think sometimes we just need to suffer for a little bit, and your friends just need to be here to listen to all your complaints. And you can suggest that the best thing they could do is walk away. but definitely never shame them. Sometimes you have to go through a cycle of bullshit to come on the other side of it and be so happy that you're done with that confusion and that your life is clear again. But to you, I will say, if it's confusing at the beginning of a relationship, just go. Don't stay. It shouldn't be. Pack everything and go, if you can. Because as you probably have guessed, and I've talked about this before on a previous episode, the relationship was as catastrophic as the courtship. With all this game that we had played, none of us had showed up in the relationship as real people. And all the mess that we had created, I think he had created it more than I did, but it always takes two people, and I was a willing player in the game. And all of that took so many years to untangle. All the confusion, all the fake selves we had shown, the way we were pretending to be different people at what we are, that we were pretending to be strong. All of these things took years to untangle until we finally realized we weren't made for each other at all. I realized that I didn't really like the person he was, and I think it was the same for him. I think that very often the energy that we feel and the energy that we create during the period of courtship is simply going to carry over in a relationship. On the contrary, all of the relationships that I've had that were beautiful, that were good, even if they ended at some point, they all started with so much clarity. There was mutual interest, punctuality, joy, fun, simplicity, vulnerability, sharing of self, and there might have been some excitement, some fear, some insecurity, but there was never this level of confusion. I think with this type of games at the beginning of a relationship, if you don't know what to do and you're still attracted to the person, is to just not play. And by that, I don't mean turning your back and going away. That's something that I'd recommend, because if the person really wants you, they'll come back and knock at your door and say, I'm sorry, I'm going to change my behavior. But you can also just stay in your truth and stay honest and just not play the game and test them that way. Tell them what you're expecting, tell them their boundaries, but also say, I actually like you and I would like to date you and I would like that thing that you're trying to create to be more simple. Would you like that? And I know it sounds trite and crazy, but it's a sense of an attitude. I'm someone who's punctual. I'm someone who calls when they say they will call. I'm someone who gets upset if I don't feel respected in a relationship. And I think that if I had been more honest with the people that had created this confusion with me, I would have not lost as much time. So that's what I recommend, even though I know it's really difficult. And I know that my first reaction is always to try to win at a game that I haven't even chosen to play. Now, here's the flip side of my theory. Just to remind you about what I said at the beginning of this episode, confusion is a sign in itself. You don't even need to go in it and to try to find a reason. I'm confused because he didn't call that day and he should have called that day. And just the fact that you're confused should be sign enough. And I think that applies to the end of a relationship as well, in a completely reverse manner. And this is one of the things that I learned a long time ago. And I'm pretty proud of it because I'm a slow learner and I've made so many mistakes. But with this one, I think I was in my early 30s when I understood, okay, breaking up when you're not sure a relationship is over is a bad thing to do. The reason is that if you're still confused, Do I love that person? Why do they make me feel that way? Do they love me? What is going on in their mind? Are they seeing someone else? Are we made to be together? Why are we not having sex? It can be so many things. But the overall feeling is confusion. Then I think the idea is to stay. And it's hard to say, but you have to stay until you're not confused anymore. When I was younger, I would do the exact opposite. If I felt insecure, if I felt confused, if I felt bad in a relationship, the first thing that I would do would be to break up. I not only was constantly threatening to break up, which was very dramatic and very traumatic and brought tears and brought makeup sex, but I would also break up, pack my things and go to my best friend's and cry there and feel the depth of my passion and my pain and reject the phone calls and the apologies and be so passionate and so dramatic. Meanwhile, reigniting the flame of the couple. And then not talking for a while, and then in some heroic act of passion, getting back together, having the best sex of our lives, and promising each other forever. Only to get back to the confusion a few weeks later, and doing it all over again. Breaking up, reigniting passion, and going into that cycle where you replace what should be peace and love and the joy of shared moments with something that is so powerful and strong and passionate and that takes all of your life, and where you're like, oh, he is the guy. I know it because each time I leave him, it's so dramatic and there is so much passion. But actually what I was doing when I was doing that was just creating a fake sense of passion, which of course at that time I thought was love. And that's something we always see in the movies, right? It's, oh, love is supposed to be this incredible, passionate affair, and love is supposed to be complicated, and lovers are supposed to break up because things are impossible, and then they get back together, and they kiss under the rain, and the lighting is amazing, and that's going to be me. And there is this steamy sex of getting back together, and love conquering everything. And I did it so many times because I believed in all those fairy tales so much. There was not a drama I wouldn't dive into. I would shout and slam the door and run down the stairs and not give a sign for a week and wait for him to call me back and all of these things. Until one day I started understanding what I was doing. And I saw that it wasn't in anyone's best interests, because these shells of relationships that had no foundations, but the walls of drama that I was creating just kept going on forever, and it was neither satisfying nor beautiful, and nothing felt real. So one day I made a promise to myself to not break up until I was sure it was over. And that was really difficult for me because the threat of breaking up was my weapon of choice in a couple. And breaking up itself was my way of igniting the flame that I so needed to feel in love when I was young. So the first time I felt like it might be time to break up with a new man I was with. But that when I thought about it, what I felt was confusion, not being sure I wanted to actually leave. And when I told myself, okay, well, if that's the case, if you're still confused, if you don't know, then you will stay. It was so hard because what I was left with were the problems to solve with the man I was with. Breaking up, you never actually face the problems. You just create more drama. And I remember with this specific relationship, the urge to break up came a few times. And each time it came and I didn't, it allowed me to go deeper in a relationship and explore it with him whether we would go in a fight or we would try therapy, whether I would let myself experience disappointment, which is something that often happens in a couple. The first few years, we start discovering the good, but also the bad side of a person, the things that we have to face and tell ourselves, okay, I can manage that. I can do with that. I can do with a hyper anxious character that I hadn't really seen before. Or the fact that he's a neat freak and that it's actually impacting the comfort of our lives. All these things that anybody that's been in a relationship has experienced. And the same on my end. Seeing them slowly understanding the kind of person that I truly am, which you can only see over the first few years, and which sometimes might, if you're me anyway, might push you to say, oh, I can't deal with that, I'm leaving. But if you're not sure, staying will show you if you actually can, and that there won't be this drama of breaking up, getting back together, breaking up, getting back together. It's much more boring to stay because you're threading with reality, the reality of someone else, the reality of your relationship, and you're actually working on it and seeing if that's actually working. And I remember in that first relationship, after I had promised myself not to break up as long as I was confused, I stayed. I stayed for, I think, maybe 6 months from the first time that I thought, this might not be the right man, this might not be the right relationship. But I wasn't sure, I was confused, and so I stayed. And after maybe 6 months or a year, one day I woke up and I was crystal clear. Nope, I've tried and this is not it. And the breakup went so well because I think we both had given the relationship everything we had. And we had honestly tried, like two adults. And he had seen that I had tried. We had done everything. And now we were sure, I think both of us, even if we were sad, that it was over. And we broke up in a very civil way. And then it was over. And I couldn't believe that I had been able to do that. But I can tell you one thing. Being able to go through the cloud of confusion before you actually break up with someone, waiting to be 100% sure, and leaving with as much clarity as we can. It doesn't prevent sadness, but it's a different sadness. It's a melancholy. It's a gratefulness for what we've tried to achieve. It's a very different type of breakup than the passionate, desperate, longing breakups that I had had before. It creates breakups that are respectful and that value and honor the relationship that we had. And that's beautiful. And from there, it is so much easier to rebuild a relationship with oneself and a relationship with the world and with whatever is to come. So those are things that I've learned through my own failures and relationships and my own craziness. If you feel confused, take it as a sign. Because even if sometimes relationships start with a complication, maybe he lives on the other side of the world. Maybe it's not the right timing. There are so many things that can feel like obstacles. But deep down, you shouldn't be confused. You should just simply know this is the choice I'm making now, whether to be or not to be with the person, but not do anything out of feeling confused. If you ever feel confused, whether it's at the beginning or at what you think is the end of a relationship, just wait. Don't go there. Don't go crazy. Don't play games. Don't go to war. Even if it might seem fun in the beginning, I think more often than not, these things are a losing game. I hope this episode helped you wherever you are on your journey, and that next time you feel confusion, a little bell will ring into your ear. Or maybe if you have a friend who's confused, I helped give you a few pointers to help them. Talk to you next week, and sending you clear, simple, and very non-confusing love. Le Rendezvous is brought to you by Doré. Doré's latest launch, La Micellaire, is a botanical micellar cleansing water that doesn't require rinsing. Minimize bathroom time and maximize outdoor time with our super simple routine. Use code podcast10 for 10% off your first order. Thank you for listening to Le Rendezvous. If you want to know more about me, find out about my newsletter and my community, find me on Instagram at Garance Doré or at my website at garance.world. And well, if you'd like to find out how to spell that crazy name, just check out the show notes. Until next time, sending you love.